Happy Wednesday, y'all. It is a celebration. Hi, I'm your host, Shameika Rhymes. Y'all know me, and you know that on Wednesdays, we always have a celebration with the exception of last week when it was Friday. But let me know in the chat where you are watching from, how you're doing this week so far, and make sure you share this with your network. And if you have any questions at all during the chat, you know y'all are my co-hosts, so make sure you drop those questions and comments again in that chat. And you know I got my eye on it, so I'll be checking out to see what you guys are saying. So tonight, do you ever feel like you're not good enough, no matter how much you accomplish? Do you ever struggle with imposter syndrome or find yourself trying to create this perfect version of your life, especially on social media or even amongst your circle, whether it's your family, your friends, or even your professional circle? Do you ever just really feel like they can't know who I really am? So tonight we're going to unpack how social media can sometimes affect our self-esteem, or all the time, and why we feel pressure to present a certain image online and again in real life, and how imposter syndrome keeps us from fully embracing who we are. So we're also going to take a look at where these insecurities come from and how we can start to overcome those. So I see Charlotte in the building, Gastonia, Long Island. Welcome, welcome. I see Jersey City. And I also see Asheville. Welcome, y'all. Good to see y'all coming in. So let me introduce you to tonight's guest. Tonight, I have Janelle Coleman. She is a licensed psychotherapist based in NYC. She's a comprehensive health educator and full spectrum birth doula. She's got a passion for mental wellness, and she supports her clients in exploring their emotions, overcoming anxiety and depression, embracing life transitions, and cultivating healthy relationships. So let's bring on Janelle.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me here today. Celebration.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. I see more New Jersey coming in the chat. Well, this is definitely a huge topic. I see it all the time on social media. Some people talking about imposter syndrome right before they go post something about something that's not true. But let's start this off by actually talking about what is imposter syndrome, because I'm not sure if we all are on the same page when it comes to that,
Mhm,
what it is.
mhm. So, imposter syndrome is a belief or thought pattern that exists when one who has maybe a objectively successful life or a list of achievements, and they believe that they have not earned that success, or they believe that they will be found out and that someone will expose them to be an imposter or a fraud. And typically, people who do experience imposter syndrome, they believe that this success was due to luck or someone else having an overwhelming influence on their success and achievements.
Okay, so they don't really feel like they actually did it on their own merit, that it was just kind of, okay, so and so helped me out, so it's really because of them. So this is a little
Exactly.
different from you and I were just actually chatting about catfishing online. So can you kind of talk a little bit about what that means so we understand the difference?
Mhm. Right. So when you have imposter syndrome, the key part of it is that there is this fear and anxiety connected to someone exposing you. And when someone is catfishing, they are presenting themselves as someone else, or having some other identity outside of themselves. So sometimes people may use a different photo, but then have the same exact identity, or they may use their photo and then claim to have this other life experience.
Okay. Okay. So what is it called? And I see Lapri mentioning this because I was curious about this too, where you believe that you've worked hard, but you're
Mhm.
not where you think you should be. So what would that be called?
So that is an aspect of imposter syndrome. It
Okay.
can also be called just having some level of low confidence, self doubt. It's not There's not quite a label, and I also want to be clear that imposter syndrome is not necessarily a diagnosis. It's not in the DSM. It's more of just this pattern that we have seen, and it's been labeled to describe this pattern and belief that people hold.
Where does it come from? Because, like, I know I've heard so many people talking about, say, attachment styles. We know that that comes from child.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this come from? Is that from childhood as well?
Yeah, so there can be different experiences that can lead to having imposter syndrome. I think about having a marginalized identity and how that can impact how you show up in a space and belief in yourself, because maybe historically people have not thought that your group can be successful. And so
Mm,
even when you have this resume that is very impressive, you have this list of achievements, you go into work and you start doubting that you should be there. You start questioning how you even got there because you have been told, whether it's in that workplace or
mhm.
society wise, that you don't deserve to have this role. It can also be a past rejection, so having not exploring the impact of rejection in your life in different ways and feeling undeserving of your accomplishments because there has been a history of rejection or even abandonment that has occurred.
Can you have imposter syndrome, like, in a relationship as well? Just looking away from the professional aspect, can that show up
Mhm.
in a relationship? A
That's a great
romantic
question.
relationship, I guess. Let me clarify,
Mhm.
a romantic relationship, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question because often we do hear imposter syndrome within the context of career and
Mhm,
work. And imposter syndrome can also show up in your romantic life, in your relationships. uh, Thinking about romantic life, so maybe you've had a history of really challenging relationships and then you end up in a really great relationship. You may question, okay, how did I get here? How did I deserve this? Maybe my partner will eventually find out that there's something wrong with me, and that may lead to some level of sabotage, or that self doubt shows up in the relationship in different ways. I also
mhm,
think about parenting. That can also show up there, where someone may question, okay, am I actually a good parent? Are my kids okay? And there can be a level of anxiety there with and having imposter syndrome show up as like overdoing, over showing up. Like maybe you are feeling the need to throw big birthday parties every year to prove that you're a good parent, or taking your family out on really expensive trips, just to prove that. So it can show up in different ways as far as relationships as well as the career and work aspect.
okay, thank you for explaining that, and I'm curious, for the people in the chat, where have you felt like you've experienced imposter syndrome? Because I feel like you just really hit all the points, like, especially the career one resonated a lot, because especially if you have had trauma in a workplace that constantly was
Mhm.
tearing you down, and then you get this position that you wanted for so long, and it's kind of like, well, maybe they were right.
Mhm.
Maybe I can't put a sentence together, whatever the job is. And I don't know if everybody else has had that experience, if anybody else has had that experience, but I also want to talk about um, validation. So,
Mhm.
because I mentioned, I think, especially on social media, that I was talking about, why do people feel that need to seek some validation from social media? So if they're feeling like this imposter syndrome, why run to social media to try to get that validation?
So first, social media is designed to make you feel good in different ways. So we get these dopamine hits, that feel good chemical when
Mhm.
we interact on social media, and that exists through likes, comments, follows, and that level of engagement. And then we go on social media and we observe other people showing their highlight reels. They are showing big milestones and achievements. And we also want to feel that we are doing that too, or to believe that we are having that level of experience. And so we look to social media to also receive the same validation that we are giving to that person when they show those things, because there's this level of comparison. Like
Oh,
we
yeah.
compare ourselves to others. We see those things. We're like, okay, do I have this? Am I this cool or interesting or smart? And we post, or we uh, sh- interact in certain ways so that we are receiving that validation on social media.
So how would you say that social media encourages, it really almost still encourages that imposter syndrome, because it's like I'm
Mhm,
seeking validation, but I also don't want people to know like that I'm hiding, that I'm really
mhm,
not as rich as I'm pretending to be, or I really don't have all these material things that I'm pretending to show on social media. What are your thoughts about that?
mhm. So thinking about this, the idea around imposter syndrome being that there's this anxiety that you will be presented as a fraud. And so if you are on social media, you may continuously keep up this life that you are presenting so that people can say like, okay, yeah, if you're someone who wants to be known as a traveler, like you are going
Mhm.
on these really cool trips all the time, really exciting, you will continue to show that, and you are receiving the validation through the likes and the comments, and that can encourage that level of engaging in that way with social media. But thinking about imposter syndrome, like maybe you are also noticing that other people are are showing the same thing, and you start comparing yourself to them, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I am not as cool, maybe these trips I'm going on aren't as cool, and people will find out that I am in fact this fraud who doesn't do these things. So that also seeing how other people are engaging and posting can encourage that level of feeling like, okay, I don't deserve these things, or this is fake, I'm not actually living this life that I have.
Okay, because it makes me also think about relationships. People will pretend their relationship is perfect online, and then 2 months later, after we're all invested in this good relationship, then they're posting other stuff like, you know, just cryptic posts like quotes and things like that.
Mhm,
So I guess that's maybe another example of the social media imposter syndrome. Like you're trying to say, like, my relationship's perfect, but it's really not. But I don't want y'all to know. So I'm not going to say we broke up, but I'm going to just post all these quotes and have you wondering what happened. I don't know.
mhm.
Maybe I'm reaching.
Yeah, I think it becomes, when thinking about imposter syndrome, right? The reality is that you do have these things. So you're not
Mhm,
pretending that are you have success, or that you have these
mhm,
achievements. They exist. What occurs in imposter syndrome is that you fear that people will find out that you are a fraud when you actually aren't. Like there's this
mhm.
level of self-doubt
Okay.
because of this, of a variety of reasons that I mentioned
Mhm,
earlier, around maybe there's some past abandonment or rejection. Maybe you are a part of a marginalized group, and there are stereotypes that people impose on you and make you doubt yourself.
mhm.
And so, just specifically thinking about that piece, it's less about you pretending to be someone you're not, but more that you are doubting yourself and convinced that someone else will doubt you as well, but in a way that they're claiming that you just are fake.
Okay, I gotcha. So, are there some other signs that someone may be experiencing imposter syndrome? I mean, you mentioned the self-doubt, but are there any other things that might pinpoint? Because someone may not understand, like, why do I feel this way?
Mhm.
Are there other signs that they could be on the lookout for to kind of be like, oh, wait, maybe it is imposter syndrome?
hmm So, one, thinking of perfectionism, and that comes up a lot with my clients, in that the need to overperform, the feeling that you can't fail, that failing means that you are inadequate, or the feeling that you can't do anything wrong at all on your journey. And the reality is, we do have some missteps. That's part of the journey, is to
Mhm.
have some level of challenge and misstep. And so perfectionism shows up a lot when we consider imposter syndrome. And also, perfectionism can look like not starting at all, or not pursuing advancements in your career, for example, or pursuing more in life because you fear that you don't actually deserve it. Although you have evidence that you have achieved this level of success because you have worked hard, and now you're at this place. It can also look like, when we go back to the career piece, coming in super early, staying super late, so that overachieving, wanting to show up more than you truly need to, so that no one, to prevent all doubt that you deserve to be in this space.
Ooh, okay. And I see a question in the comments saying, what about feeling imposter syndrome when moving to a new city?
Mm, okay, so I think what comes up is this feeling that you may not deserve what you have. So when I hear that, I'm thinking, is there a feeling when you go to a new city that you don't deserve to be in this new city? That maybe this is an accident or some stroke of luck that you got here to this new city. I'm wondering if when we say imposter syndrome, what is meant is more of that doubt of uh, your confidence, or having your confidence being feeling lower because you're in an uncomfortable place, and rather than someone is going to say like, oh, you don't belong here, you don't deserve to have these things, while although you have achieved them.
Ah, okay. Okay. And I want to remind everybody, I see more people coming into the chat. You guys, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to post them and we'll get to them as we move along. So I wanted to go back to that. And it almost seems like sometimes that work-life balance will definitely suffer because you're going above and beyond, getting up
Mhm.
early, getting to the office first, or if you're remote, you're getting up the
Mhm.
crack of dawn because you're wanting to get stuff done, and then you're staying late, and kind of just going above and beyond, like you mentioned. But I'm trying to think of, you mentioned that the worth part, maybe not feeling like
Mhm.
you're worth it or that you deserve good things. How do we fix that?
Hmm.
How do we fix that?
Mhm. One, I would say start out with naming it. What are the feelings that are present for you when you feel like you don't belong there, or that you don't deserve to be there? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it sadness? What is coming up for you, and naming it, because there's evidence that naming those feelings can help to decrease how they show up for us, as far as emotionally, and how they impact us. And then thinking about also just the basics, the foundations of self care. So with my
Yeah.
clients, I talk about, okay, it's harder to explore these deeper traumas and hurts if you are hungry and you haven't eaten a nutritious meal, if you're thirsty, if you are sleeping 4 hours a night. So really getting to the basics of how you are caring for yourself, and being able to then explore and go deeper into that feeling of unworthiness. And then exploring with, you can explore this in community, so that can look like with your friends, and help, and having your friends, your support group, in the sense of who's in your community, who helps you, to uplift you, help, going to them to tell them what's coming up for you, because
Mhm,
often people see us differently, and they can, especially people who are uplifting you, and they can say,
mhm,
well, I understand you're feeling that way, but here's evidence that this is untrue. Here's evidence that you actually deserve to be where you are. And then if you can, going to a mental health professional, because sometimes these wounds are very deep, and being able to explore like what's underneath there when you are coming in contact with those feelings of unworthiness.
mhm. I see a question asking, Lavalia Williams, I'm sorry if I messed her name up, but she says, "What if you have the drive, work, furthering your education? Like, what's wrong with that?" And I think that one, I don't think anything's wrong with that.
Mhm.
I think in this case, what we're saying, like, and maybe you should explain it a little better since you're the therapist and not me, because it's not going to come out in a wellness way. So I'll let
Mhm.
you explain why that is okay, but there's a difference when it's imposter syndrome.
Mhm. So is the question is, sorry, I can't see the
Oh,
question. So
sorry.
is it,
So the question was, if you have the drive, the work, and you're furthering your education, what's wrong with that?
there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
So with imposter syndrome, and it's this belief that while you have the drive and the work, that you're doubting that it's actually there, that
Mhm.
it's that you're not in this position, this relationship because you actually put effort in, that it's just because someone else did all the work for you, or that you you were lucky and that's why you had this wonderful life or role. And so, yeah, if you're doing the work and you're putting in the effort, and sometimes with a job that can look like putting in more effort than you usually would because you have a goal and you're working towards it. And so imposter syndrome is not like, while the signs of imposter syndrome can sound somewhat like, oh, you really care about your job, the key part is that you are doubting yourself, and that you believe that other people don't believe that you deserve what you have.
Mhm. Did that answer your question, Lavelia? Hopefully that did. I see lots of people checking in. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Celebration, you all. Um, so, what are some other fears that may hold people back from showing their authentic self, especially when they're showing up, whether it is at work or around their friends or online, aside from that self-doubt and just not feeling worthy or that they deserve just to be authentic? Like, I don't really know
Mhm.
what, I know some people just aren't comfortable
Mhm.
showing a certain aspect of themselves online. What are your thoughts?
Yes. So one, I want to normalize that you don't have to show your full self online. People
Yes.
use social media for different reasons. Some people call themselves lurkers, where they're just online looking at things, observing, they're not really interacting or engaging. So I'm speaking more to the people who are using it maybe to connect more with friends and family, connect to a larger community, and they're feeling like they are not being their full selves. And so part of that fear is judgment. It's
Oh, yeah.
completely normal, and it's part of us being human, that we want to be accepted, we want to feel a part of the group. And when on social media specifically, people can judge you in ways that they may not judge you in person, and that can be very scary. We see that often. People
Mhm.
say unkind things that we couldn't even fathom someone saying face to face. And
Mhm.
so there's that fear of having that judgment from others that could hurt your feelings, and also to not feel a part of the group. So if you want to be a part of a certain community, and you show your full self, you may fear that you won't be allowed in that community in some way, or accepted in that community. And that comes up a lot when people consider, okay, I want to be my full self, and the fears that are associated with that.
Ah, okay. And there's oftentimes those times where you may have said something 10 years ago online and you say one thing now, and somebody will go snatch that post from 10 years, like, is this you?
Hmm.
And you may not even be that same person anymore.
Hmm. Right. There's a record that is not, that you don't experience when you're face to face with someone. Like, people aren't
Mm,
writing down what you're saying and then coming up later with it. So even thinking about people having text receipts and all these things, and that
right.
on one end it can be helpful, right? Because some people don't remember what they say. And on the other
Yeah.
end, it can create levels of discomfort and harm, because it doesn't allow for people to grow and move past maybe a time when they were 13 and they had some views that don't align with their current values.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm curious, in the chat, y'all, have you ever had an experience, especially online, where you feel that imposter syndrome, um, causing you to kind of be cautious and not really allow you to show up authentically? This just when you were just saying this about, people online saying things, it reminded me, and y'all know I love to get transparent on here. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to co-host Entertainment Tonight Canada, and I was very passionate about a specific topic, wasn't even realizing the comments that they were ripping me a new one, right? They were tearing me to pieces, but it made me feel like an imposter, like I don't even belong on this show. I was going
Mm,
to stop doing all things in front of the camera, and I really, it made me feel like I don't belong here. I didn't deserve to be here. I wasn't ready yet. All those things, until I had to take a step back, like, you know what? I'm looking at all my accomplishments. Yes, I do deserve to be here. So I think it's also worth taking a step back and looking at what you have accomplished and really taking it
Mhm.
in. For me personally, it was
Mhm.
trying to also be present. And I don't know if you
Mhm.
want to go into that, because I tend to, and I don't know if anybody else, I'm very much like, okay, I'm working on this, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And then
Mhm.
someone may come up and say, this really impacted me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's like over my
Mhm.
head, because I'm like, oh, that was 3 projects ago, But so
Mhm.
I don't know if that is also a part of the imposter syndrome, is if that's a way to combat it, is staying present. What do you think about that?
I agree. So being present and celebrating those small wins as well. So back to the journey. The journey is a huge part of
Mhm,
why we appreciate our accomplishments and our successes so much. However, when we are online, we often see the end goal, we see the end result.
uh-huh,
And when we are thinking about, okay, am I deserving of this role to be in this space? It is important to remind yourself of the journey. Okay, if thinking about your school experience, the challenges of that, the each role that you had that led up to this place, each relationship that you developed that led you to this moment, and that is a part of being mindful and reflective, thinking back to all of those aspects that led you
mhm.
to this success.
Oh, yes, yes. I see Laurel Jackson has a question. She says, how about when you have become much older and you're still feeling imposter syndrome?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think about age in the realm of comparison is also because when we are online, we see a range of people. We see people who are, I often speak about the young entrepreneurs, and I'm like, on
Mhm,
one hand, this is wonderful. I'm so happy you're engaging so deeply in something you love, and on the other hand, it's there's so much more life to live, and this you don't have to discover the next big thing at 15.
mhm,
There's so much, there's so much to do and happen, and it often feels like there's this rush to get somewhere. So even when you are older, there's still so much to learn, there's still so much growth that can happen. And this feeling that someone's going to find out, like, oh, you don't deserve to be where you are. Well, many of us are, I consider myself a lifelong learner, right? So
mhm,
I don't think that I know everything. I'm an expert on all the things connected to my role. Yes, there is so much I am still open to and wanting to learn. And having that perspective can be helpful when we think about just age. Like, okay, you're older, people may people may question, like, should you be here because maybe your age, and then they should also be open to learning more. They should
mhm.
still be open to growth. And so that I hope that we start to liberate ourselves from that piece around, I'm too old to do XYZ, or I'm too um it's my time has expired for doing these things, because there's still room.
I love that. Yes. Age is just a number. It doesn't really mean anything. That's a great question, Laurel. Thank you for that question. Um, let's see. I lost my place over here. So, what are some strategies, which we kind of talked about a little bit? Let's go a little bit deeper on some strategies for developing your self worth that isn't really tied to outside validation, whether it's social media, your friends, and all that. Where do we
Hmm.
start within?
Hmm.
And for me, I'll give you an example. I actually hung up these awards that have just been laying around collecting dust, and I was like, I need to see these every day.
Hmm. Yes, I think that's wonderful. So again, that's part of the journey.
Yeah,
And like you mentioned, sometimes there's this desire to just go to the next thing, to
yeah.
achieve the next thing. And thinking about just with that internal validation, we may not always get congratulations for those small steps that we took to get to where we are, but being able to do that for yourself is so important. And also just being honest with naming how you are feeling, even when the feelings are more challenging. So if you are feeling jealous of someone, if you're comparing yourself to someone and having those feelings that you aren't where you want to be, naming that for yourself. And then also bringing along the evidence that that's not true, that it's not true that you don't deserve these things, or it's not true that you are less than this person. And recognizing that we don't have the full story also of everyone's journey, just like people don't know ours. We don't fully know someone else's. So bringing it back to the social media piece, we don't have the full picture as to how someone is where they are.
Mm-hmm. And I mentioned to you that this, I was debating if I was going to bring it up, but it's in my head now. Um, where and you mentioned this could be a part of being the imposter part, where if you're creating a story that's not true, as far as like say there's an accomplishment and you post it and it's not really true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know really why someone would do that, or is it just because that comparison and self-doubt,
Mm-hmm.
you see your peers like, oh, they've gotten this accolade, let me post something, so one, it makes me feel better and they think that I'm on their level too. Is that what it is, or am I off
Mm-hmm.
base there?
Well, if you are posting something that's untrue, then that is literally being an imposter. You are not telling the truth if you're fabricating achievements
Mhm,
to get validation. I think about when we consider just what we're posting, and it could be true, but does it align with your values, and are you doing it with intention to share and celebrate with your community, or are you doing it to go up against the other person who you feel threatened by in some way? So when imposter syndrome shows up in that regard, I think about, now if you're in this cycle of, you have achieved great things, yes, we see it,
mhm,
you know it to some extent, and now you're having anxiety about someone saying you don't deserve this. You may then go into overdrive in a space like social media, where
mhm,
you are trying to get that validation, that external validation, to prove that, okay, yes, I do deserve this. Look how many likes I received. Look how
mhm.
many people um commented on this thing. And then you go back to work, and then you're back in that cycle of, oh my gosh, do I actually belong here? Is this where I should be?
That makes so much sense. So how do we reframe our mindset when that self-doubt creeps in, where you start to feel like, that, you know what, I don't belong here, or I maybe I'm not as good at this as I thought I was, or whatever the case is. How do you reframe it maybe in the moment?
Hmm. In the moment, I would say, back to bringing up the evidence that this is untrue. So when we think about cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, sometimes we have
Mhm,
emotions and thoughts that don't exactly mesh, or they are impacting the other one. And so if you're thinking, okay, I'm not deserving of this, and then you're feeling bad, how can you shift that thought so that you start to improve your mood and become more confident? And that thought can be, okay, well, actually, I had this really great presentation the other day. I met with my supervisor, and they reviewed, gave me my annual review, and it was positive. And bringing in that evidence so that you can shift your mood when it comes to those low feelings of self doubt.
gotcha. I've also heard people say, and my friends remind me of this all the time, celebrate yourself, celebrate those
Hmm.
small wins. And so my
Hmm.
question is always, how do you celebrate yourself? How do you do that? What do we do?
Well, you just mentioned that you put up your awards, right? So
Yeah.
that is part of it. And on one end, we spoke a lot about the validation from social media, and
Mhm,
on the other end, we have more intimate communities. Like, we have communities that we see face to face. We have our family.
right.
We have people who we connect with more personally, and
Mhm,
that can be a part of celebrating ourselves. Is having a moment where maybe with your friends you can be intentional about it, saying like, okay, today we're going to share our small wins, right? Instead of having it be a passive, like, I'm just going to post this thing and hope someone sees it and maybe they'll bring it up. But have it be intentional about, okay, what did you do that you are excited about, you feel good about? And that could be, okay, you actually woke up the time you wanted to and did a 15-minute workout, right? That's also a win. It's like
Yeah.
there are other parts of our lives that are important to celebrate, because this we're dealing with a lot in this world, and to
Yeah.
have community and feel safe to celebrate even those little things that make you proud can be very helpful.
I love that. I didn't think about that, that there's like all kinds of things you can celebrate and it doesn't have to be by yourself. Yeah, I like that
Mhm.
with your community. You guys, we have like about 10, 12 minutes left. So make sure you drop those questions in. You guys are doing amazing with these comments in here. I love seeing that a lot of everybody can resonate with having some sort of imposter syndrome. Because like I mentioned before, you're not alone. We've all experienced it in some form or fashion. Now, let's go back to in a relationship when you start to
Mhm.
feel those feelings of I don't belong in this relationship, and not because it's toxic or anything like that. It's because maybe you're not used to a good, healthy relationship. You're used to
Mhm.
toxic, and so how do you start to feel like, or what do you tell yourself when you start to have those feelings when you're in a relationship?
Mhm. So being present is
Mhm.
important in this moment, and being able to name again what are the difficult feelings that are coming up. I find that when sometimes when working with clients, they have this kind of like this soup of feelings, and it's resulting in them doing things that they don't want to do, or that don't align with their values or what they actually care about. And so being able to name, like, okay, I'm feeling insecure because I
Mhm.
had this toxic relationship or this history of toxic relationships. I'm now with this person who makes me feel safe. And that is uncomfortable because it's new, it's abnormal. Although it's wonderful, it's new and abnormal. And being
Mhm.
able to name that, because now that we have named it, we can then think about, okay, what can we explore further? What can you do to also within the relationship, being able to name that with your partner? Like, this is what's going on for me, and I want to hold myself accountable as well if I do something that seems out of character, or if I do something that doesn't make sense. I want to name that this is that I'm feeling some level of, like, I'm not deserving this because of my past history, and working to remind yourself that you do deserve it. And part of that is we deserve to be in healthy, happy relationships, and having a past that did not look like that does not need to be a determinant for what you deserve in the present.
Oh, I like that. Well, I'm going to take it a step further with this, staying in the relationship vein, or well, dating. With dating, especially nowadays, it's almost like you're competing. It feels like. But what about when that imposter syndrome creeps up while dating? Because as you know, a lot of people are on social media, so
Mhm.
I've seen people say, "Oh, my man or my woman can't be liking somebody else's picture or whatever it is." But what about that when it's that comparison starts to creep up? Like, for example, I'm just going off the top of my head here. If you know what their ex looks like, and you're like, "Okay, I don't
Mhm.
look like that," or is he or she going to be interested in me? Those types of things. Or
Mhm.
I don't have this, and this person they dated before had this, and this. Will they like me? Those type of things. And y'all don't act like I'm crazy. Have y'all ever had these thoughts when you've been out here dating? Let me know in the chat.
Mhm.
But do you see where I'm going with it? Like those thoughts that come up where you're feeling like you're comparing, and then you're feeling like maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm not worthy to
Mhm.
be out here in the dating pool, or whatever it is.
Mhm. And it's important to note that you mentioned the comparison is coming
Yeah.
up because you are seeing images, you are
Mhm.
interacting in some way with people who you probably would not have access to had you not been on social media.
Right.
So,
And on their
and
page peeking.
exactly. And so that is when we go back to mindfulness and being present and thinking about, okay, how can I limit this interaction so that I'm not triggering myself every moment that I'm online? And
Mhm.
also exploring, why do you need to do this? Why do you need to look at your ex's past relationship? How is that serving you? Because even when we do things that are what in the therapy space we label as maladaptive behaviors,
Mhm.
they're supporting you in some way. They're helping you cope with something in some way. And so in this case, this could be an insecurity. And that is part of your personal journey as far as exploring, like, what is this insecurity? Is this connected to past relationships, past non-romantic relationships? When we
Mhm.
think about insecurity and feeling a level of a need to compare ourselves to other people.
Oh yeah. So y'all stay off them people's social media. Stop being a social media detective. What are some other healthy ways to use social media, especially when you're feeling that imposter
Mhm.
syndrome? What are some healthy ways that you can make sure that you're using it and protecting your
Mhm.
mental health?
So I am not someone who thinks that we should just get rid of social media.
Yeah.
Clearly, it is very useful. Someone may be on it right now viewing this. So we
Mhm.
are. So it has a utility and it can be used for good. It is less useful when we are feeling anxious when we are on it, when we are feeling like we are on it for hours and it's getting in the way of our actual intimate relationships, developing those, when we are not engaging with restorative activities like exercise or doing something fun or just engaging in some level of play. And so being mindful about the time, how to, like, maybe you need to limit the time you're on it, maybe you need to mute certain people, and shifting the what you see. So if you're, especially now, there's a lot going on politically, and that can
Mhm.
make people feel a lot of anxiety. So maybe you want to have more meme pages up that are just funny, or maybe
Yeah.
you want to just limit your social media to friends and family because you can just engage on a social level. And that can shift. So that mute feature is amazing.
Yes.
You can still follow someone and mute it, and then when you feel at a better place to engage with them, you can unmute. Being using your phone's tools as far as just monitoring the time that you're on it, and remembering to get fresh air, move your body, eat good food, oh, and get sleep.
I am a fan of that mute button. I don't want to unfollow, but I'll mute you really
Exactly.
quick. This has been such a great conversation. Um, does anybody have any more questions in the chat before we wrap up? You got a couple minutes. But I want to ask you, what feeds your soul? I ask all the guests this question.
Hmm. A lot of what I mentioned, being in community, taking care of myself, engaging in some level of just play and fun. So it, we work a lot. Often, many people, many people in the chat will probably also work a lot, and
Mhm.
so really having time to just metaphorically, literally let your hair down and engage in play. And so that has been so important for me, especially when doing a lot of hard work and hearing a lot of difficult things, having fun with people who I care about.
Oh, I love that. That's a great thing to have to feed your soul. Well, it looks like you answered everyone's questions. So thank you, everyone in the chat, for your wonderful comments and questions. Thank you, Janelle, for coming and sharing your knowledge with us. It's been amazing. This has been an eye opening conversation because, a lot of us probably had one idea of what imposter syndrome is, and you cleared that up for us. So thank you for that.
Yes, this has been truly wonderful. I enjoyed my time today.
And how can people reach out to you if they
Mhm,
want to, and I'm not sure if you're accepting new patients or if they have any
mhm.
further questions about imposter syndrome.
Yes, so I am available via email, Janelle at madisonsqtherapy.com. I am accepting new clients. I am licensed in New York. New Jersey is in the works. And so you need to live in New York to for me to see you at the present time. I do see clients virtually and in person. And then if you would like to engage with me on social media, Therapy Unbound is my handle, and I plan to post more about the therapy work and journey. and healing and the like. And otherwise, also, if you go to MadisonSquareTherapy.com, you can learn more about my therapy work.
Perfect. Thank you. I see a lot of great information. Thank yous in the chat. So everybody's loving this conversation. Thank you again, Janelle, for coming and sharing out. Of course, you'll have to come back and we'll find, I'll find something else to talk about and bring you back.
I would love to. This has been great.
Yeah. So for more information about mental health and imposter syndrome, you can head over to blackdoctor.org for plenty of articles and resources there. But coming up on Soulibration, we're going to be shining a light on Endometriosis Awareness Month. So make sure you wear your yellow next week. It's a condition that affects millions, but is often misunderstood. So we're going to break down the symptoms, the challenges with diagnosis, and what you need to know to advocate for your health. So make sure that you come back next Wednesday for that. But thank you all again. Thank you, co-host. You've been great as always. Thank you, Janelle. And I hope everyone has a soul-filled rest of the week, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Have a good night.